Good Sunday morning to everyone out there across Houston, across the United States and beyond, wherever you're watching. Good morning to you. I'm Meteorologist Addison Green here at KHOU based in Houston, and we're going to dive into your tropical update where we're talking about Hurricane Larry as well as Invest91L. And that's a little disturbance that we've been tracking the past several days, making its way through the Western Caribbean. And if it was able to survive the journey going over the Yucatan Peninsula, then we could talk about potentially it going in towards the Gulf of Mexico, and that is looking to be the case. The latest information we got right here for you is talking about Larry becoming our third major hurricane of the season. It's looking very powerful on satellite and radar imagery. I'll show you those details in just a moment. But good news, it will be a fish storm. That means it's staying out in the open waters of the central Atlantic with only a passing glancing blow to the island nation of Bermuda as we go in towards the middle of this upcoming work week. Invest91L, it's percolating, it's building on up that potential from the Western Caribbean as it's making its journey over the Yucatan in towards the Gulf of Mexico. And if it does strengthen, get itself more organized, it has a chance of being named Mindy. That's if we get to have sustained winds of 39 miles per hour or higher, having a closed circulation indicating it is now starting to become more organized, in that which case it gets its name. But if it gets up just one notch from where it is currently right now, it'd be labeled a tropical depression, but we have not gotten that just yet. There's no closed circulation. It's kind of a little bit of a mess, but you would be too if you were doing that journey going over the Yucatan Peninsula going on right now. Visible satellite imagery. Let me step off camera for just a second where we can clearly see this is Hurricane Larry, major Hurricane Larry, churning about several hundred miles away from the Lesser Antilles. You can see them right there just on the corner of your screen. But what we can also see right there is that very classic textbook feature when you see a very powerful hurricane of the hurricane eye. And it's a very large eye. It's relatively 70 miles in diameter. And to put that in perspective, if you were doing a drive from, say, Disney World in Orlando, Florida, going down towards Tampa, St. Petersburg on the West Coast, that would be the distance you would travel to go from end to end inside the eye. So it's a very large eye, but what we have seen over the course of the past several different updates is that we are seeing that it's not really strengthening further. It's kind of capped off in its strengthening process. That's because it's running into some issues out there across the central portions of the Atlantic Ocean. So we got a couple of areas of pressure we're keeping our eyes on. We're looking at the water vapor imagery at 250 millibars with the jet stream wind. So you're looking at the same altitude a commercial jetliner will be flying around. So we have an area of high pressure building on up just to the north and east of Larry, and we have one down towards the south and west, and then we got an upper area of low pressure just north and east of Puerto Rico. What these are all helping to doing, acting like gears in a machine, is helping to crank up and push Larry to the north-northwesterly direction. But on that journey, if these systems are having too much of an interaction directly with Larry, they're starting to create some wind shear, and as a result, we're starting to see a little bit of some strengthening capping going on. Also, it's running into a little bit of some drier air just up ahead of it, so that's also helping it from keeping it from strengthening further. It was originally supposed to become a Category 4 hurricane. Now it looks like it's going to stop at Category 3. But there's also a cold front and a dive in the jet stream right there across the northern sections of the Atlantic Ocean, which will help to kick it out to sea and keep pushing it away from Bermuda. But what we were talking about hurricanes earlier on in these videos, as well as all the meteorologists here at KHOU, is that when you're describing a hurricane, you're looking for if it's vertically stacked. It's a vertically stacked engine. Here's your engine at the surface of the water. Here's your exhaust tailpipe right there. And you want it to vent out cleanly, nicely, in order to get normal hurricane wind flow to come around, in which case you're seeing a continuing strengthening system if it doesn't run into any other obstacles along its journey. But when you're talking about high levels of wind shear up aloft, you're now dealing with strong wind shear that can disrupt that wind flow, and you're turning that system on its side, in which case it's going to struggle to breathe and strengthen as it continues to go on its pathway. And that pathway right here for Hurricane Larry, by the way, during this advisory from the early morning hours on Sunday, has sustained winds of 120 miles per hour, which makes it a moderate strength Category 3 hurricane. It's moving to the northwest at 14 miles per hour, and it will be doing so over the course of the next several days before it starts to get picked up by some upper level winds and being driven to the north, just happen to push it east of Bermuda right there. So the island nation of Bermuda will see some rough wave activity, some breezy winds. And if you're traveling over that way, or if you happen to be watching us from there, just bear that in mind. You're going to look like you're getting a chance to dodge the system. Not completely, but nonetheless, you will see it just make a nice glancing blow. And a lot of the computer models, the spaghetti plots, are in agreement with that prognosis. We only have like maybe one or two that still want to bring it over directly across the island, but we tend to look at the general consensus of those models, and most of them are saying it's moving further and further out to sea. But as it does so, it will still be churning up some rough waves, not just in Bermuda, but up and down the East Coast. So if you're living out there in Cape Cod, you're down in the Outer Banks, you're heading down that way over the course of this shortened work week ahead, because we have Labor Day coming up tomorrow, you're going to have some rough beach concerns because of the churning of the waves that this system will be doing, despite it being several hundred miles away. So you'll deal with some maybe dangerous rip current concerns, some minor coastal flooding, especially during high tides at best. But from New England down to Florida, that will be the concern as we watch Larry move on by and then move further away out to sea. After Larry, we are keeping our eyes on something a little closer to home, moving on in across the Gulf of Mexico. Like I was talking about, that disturbance making its way from the western portions of the Caribbean Sea, drifting on over. You can see it right there, heading over the Yucatan Peninsula. And what we're looking for right here, you can see kind of like a little bit of some rolling over, a little bit of some tumbling right there, starting to show a little bit of some more organization as it's moving away from the landmass, trying to go over the open waters of the southern end of the Gulf of Mexico. That's the Bay of Campeche right there. And we did see Hurricane Grace move through that area several weeks ago. And once it did so, it quickly strengthened rapidly, I may add, before it made landfall out there in the west coast, or east coast, I should say, of Mexico as a major hurricane. So that is possible that with the right conditions, we can see weakening systems or struggling systems quickly get their acts together before they make their landfall. The case in which we see this activity developing is going to be right here in this highlighted area, which is anywhere between the southwestern portion of the Florida Panhandle all the way out there towards the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico, where we do have some relatively warm sea surface temperatures as well as some lighter wind shears. But as we were just showing you before with the spaghetti plots with Hurricane Larry, those were generally in agreement. Can't quite say the same with this system right here, this tropical wave Invest91L. That's the official title the National Hurricane Center has as it is monitoring this situation. Now, we will start to see more data come on in over time, and once we see it move over the open waters away from land, it should be able to get a closed circulation, in which case you'll have an easier time to pinpoint the center of it and therefore start to build up your forecast tracks after that. But the spaghetti plots right now, they're all over the place, like a big bowl of spaghetti. They're anywhere between the southern end of the Gulf of Mexico over the Bay of Campeche to northern portions of Mexico. One of them wants to go straight on a beeline, shot in towards southern sections of Texas. And several of the models want to bring it in towards Louisiana, as well as in towards the Florida Panhandle. Of course, Louisiana, after major Hurricane Ida made landfall about a week or so ago, does not need anything coming through anywhere close to that area. They're still recovering, still rebuilding after Ida passed on through. But as we look in the sea surface temperatures, we are looking for very warm sea surface temperatures, numbers around 85 degrees and higher. You need at least sea surface temperatures of 80 degrees for these tropical systems to work with and then either maintain their strength or strengthen and develop further. But when you talk about numbers getting up into the mid to upper 80s to low 90s, that's when you're really dealing with some high octane fuel you're adding in towards that engine right there, in which case kind of ramps itself up and maybe get able to get itself going even faster, especially if it has a lack of wind shear and it has no land that it's interacting with, creating any friction on it. But as we start to look at this system moving on in towards the central portions of the Gulf of Mexico, we're going to be maybe dealing with a little bit of a little roadblock ahead. That's because we have high pressure dropping on down across the central plains, and it's going to help to force a little bit of a slowdown of that system as it tries to make its way northward, which, regardless if it develops into a tropical storm or a hurricane or even a major hurricane, either way, anything that slows down a tropical system doesn't make it just disappear. Instead, you'll get the rain being wrung out of it and over the same areas over and over again, in which case you can see that potential from the Florida Panhandle all the way in towards about Corpus Christi area in Texas. So we have to keep our eyes on that potential as we go forward in time. But let's show you one possible outcome as we look at the GFS model, the American model, to see how it tracks the system over the course of the next several days. So we have that high pressure system for you right there, eventually moving on in behind this weak cold front. That's going to be dropping on down across the southeast and the southern plains. It'll help to bring around scattered showers, maybe some isolated thunderstorms heading in from Sunday night in through Labor Day across from Texas in towards the southeast. But here's that little wave right there we were mentioning. Right now, it doesn't look like anything too organized, although I do see one closed isobar right there, but it's a very broad closed isobar. As we move forward in time, we're going to watch eventually this little cluster activity move northward, and we still don't really have a closed isobar, closed center of circulation, so it's still discombobulated. It's all over the place. Got high pressure over to the east, trying to steer it northward, while this high pressure system is coming from the north and west, behind this cold front that's helping to keep it southward. But as we move forward past Tuesday afternoon, we can now start to see a little bit of an area of low pressure starting to develop, and it will do so potentially, according to this one model run, a couple, maybe 100 miles or so off the southeast coastal areas of Louisiana. And if this front continues to drive southward at its current forecasted pace, it will help to deflect that system right there, which could be named Mindy, moving on in across the Florida Panhandle, going in towards northern Florida, and moving on in and potentially in towards the coastal areas of the Carolinas and Georgia. But this front right here will act like a barrier, like a force field, keeping that chance for rain showers to going up and over very low to next to none, because we also have some slightly drier air coming in behind this front. But right up ahead of that front and along that front, will be helping to squeeze out more moisture over time, in which case you may be dealing with some high rainfall rates as well as some high rain totals eventually when all is said and done. But as we see high pressure down in the south trying to kick this thing further to the east, because these things don't like to sit still, they like to move, they just get moved by the upper level winds. They'll get moved right along that cold front right up ahead of it and get kicked out to sea, which is some good news right there. We don't need anything stalling over an area. Across southeast Texas, Houston, for instance, knows all about a stalling tropical system when you talk about Hurricane Harvey. Of course, that brings back a lot of bad memories across for the area. And what we had to deal with recently with the remnants of Ida, despite it being a remnant low, all that tropical moisture was being wrung out of the atmosphere from Philadelphia all the way up into southern sections of New England. And we even saw enhanced tropical moisture being wrung out at an accelerated pace because of a similar setup going on with the upper level winds, helping to do a little force squeeze play. And we saw the unfortunate dire situations that unfolded with all the flooding images we saw on social media, as well as the severe weather that did develop with several tornadoes popping up in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and southern New York. So we don't need anything like that, but unfortunately we will watch this front come on down, interact potentially with the system if it does get its act together. Remember, this is just one forecast model run. We never say focus on just one. Focus on all the computer model runs as they come on in, as also the forecast. If we aren't your local meteorologist here in Houston, or you have some others that you watch, or wherever you are in the country, make sure you get those latest updates as they come on in, because we help to break down the latest information and get that to you so that way you can make the best plans to prepare yourself, your friends, your family, your loved ones to make sure that you are safe and sound if you happen to be up there in the Gulf Coast. Hurricane frequency. As we're going through September, we notice that we see a lot more activity popping on up. In fact, climatologically speaking, the peak of hurricane season comes through around mid-September, September 15th or so. We are here at September 5th, so we are climbing the mountaintop. That's Mount Everest right there. We're starting to climb that peak. And as we go in towards the middle of the season, that's where we could potentially see more tropical waves come out off the African coastal areas, as well as coming in, developing out there towards the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, even off the coastal areas of the Carolinas. The conditions are ripe for tropical waves to develop in many spots. But as we go forward in time in towards October, we start to see less conducive options for those tropical waves to work with. And after a brief little spike right there in mid to late October, we see that activity really start to back on down towards a much more of a lull as you go in towards the colder months. Sea surface temperatures get colder, there's more wind shear, those waves don't really have a chance to develop at all. In fact, they usually just fade away. We did have, of course, a few exceptions in not too long recent memory. 2005, the year that rewrote the record books when we had waves developing and tropical systems developing in December. Even had one that carried over in towards the upcoming next year, 2006. But like I said, season officially ends. November 30th. But we do keep our eyes on the tropics just in case a few waves decide to rain on our parade as we go in towards the holiday season in December. Have any questions, thoughts, concerns, comments? Feel free to reach out on social media about this or any weather question you may have. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We'll have another update coming for you later on today. And of course, as we go through the week ahead, as we track the little tropical wave. Take care.